Hello, hello. You can all hear me? You can all right, that's good. Right, fantastic. Thank you for that wonderful introduction from Kevin. I'm a front-end designer developer, as you might have heard. And as you might also be able to guess from my accent, I am also British. But please don't worry, I'm actually one of those British people who likes Europe, unlike everybody else in my country. And that's why I live in Berlin, which is such a beautiful, amazing place. But I was attracted by certain things that it had. It's got some of the best food on the planet, really quite gourmet quality food, which I love. It's a very conservative and quiet place where people keep to themselves. And it's just generally very German. It's got a very nice, quiet, respectable attitude. So I love living there. And there in Berlin, I work for Springer Nature as a senior front-end dev. And if you haven't heard of Springer Nature, it's actually one of the largest academic and scientific publishers on the planet. So should have heard of them. Does stuff like Biomed Central, Scientific American, and the eponymous journal Nature. That kind of place where you get published in there, it's Nobel Prize territory for you. And it helps scientists to get their work seen by other scientists and the community in general. And I really love it there. But I didn't come to talk to you about that. I came to have just a quick chat about the single biggest invention in human history. So hopefully I can get through this in 30 minutes and it should be fine. It's no biggie. And I just want to riff a little bit on Jeremy Keith here. He does something very similar. And I just want to talk about the web, about how utterly incredible it is. And it's incredible because of its dumbness. It really is dumb. It's stupid. And that's what makes it amazing. It's a bunch of dumb, stupid technologies put together, and they come to make something amazing. And so I'm just going to talk very quickly about some of those things. And I think we can safely say it started with telegraphs. Yeah? Everybody's familiar with what telegraphs are? The beep, 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 the beep, beep kind of things. Yeah? Yeah? And these things completely changed the face of global communication. I mean, we went from weeks that it would take to send a message anywhere on the planet to seconds. That was such an incredible change. And the telegraph allowed the invention of the telephone. You know, people wanted to get in on the act. They wanted to get their voices heard. And that used the same wires. And then those telephones allowed the invention of computer networks. Now, obviously, we had to invent the computer first, but those computers could then communicate with each other. And I don't know if anyone else is blessed with being old enough to remember this particular movie, War Games. Can you remember the stuff with the acoustic couplers? You put the telephone on the modem. Then the modem screamed at another computer somewhere in the distance, and then that computer screamed back. And they were all screaming together. And that allowed this whole distributed network thing to happen. And then we standardized things. We standardized with TCP/IP, and computers could talk to each other. And eventually they all merged together. They formed the interconnected networks, the internet. Big story by itself. And then we built application protocols on top of this. You know, common things to enable us to do this stuff that we do every day, email and DNS and HTTP. And we had to figure out ways for those to communicate. So we had URIs, which allowed, you know, standardized ways of finding things. So you might have, you know, whitehouse.gov or ultimate idiot at whitehouse.gov. It could be anything on there. And then, finally, HTML. Vague but exciting, as Tim Berners-Lee's boss said. Seriously understating the whole foundation of our careers here in the world and the utter world-changingness of it. And I think we should stop for a second and think about the web, about how amazingly strong it is. And it's strong because of that dumbness we mentioned, because of all these dumb technologies that have come together. Especially HTML, which is this simple, very simple declarative language. And by declarative, well, what do we mean by that? I guess you could say that it's suggestive. HTML suggests to the browser what it wants to happen. It's all like, hey, could you maybe do this for me? And the browser comes back with, well, yeah, now you ask nicely, yeah, maybe I could do that. It's got a little bit of flirting in it, a little bit of suggestiveness. But this suggestiveness is what makes the web and HTML incredibly robust. Because you can pull a page apart as it's running. You can go in there, it's like the Terminator, man. You just can't stop it. You can go in there and rip its guts out. You can remove 90% of the code from a page. But at the end of it, you can still click a button and proceed with it. And that robustness is why the web dominates. A stricter language would have broken 100%. It would have fallen over. It's so fragile, it would have shattered as soon as it encountered a huge error, like 90% of its code base being removed. And in addition to that, the web is, well, it's unrestricted. And in the early days, anyone could build a browser. And anyone could get a browser for any machine or any operating system. And that meant that anyone could publish things. And the early web was weird. It was fantastic for that weirdness. People used to just get their brain dumps onto a HTML page and put it out there in public. They used to declare their love for things and people. And even some famous souls, you know, got their early start up on there, on the early weird web. But, unfortunately, some darker times came. Possibly more dark than I thought there, given the contrast issues. What used to be free and weird suddenly became balkanized and commercialized and completely locked in. I don't know if anybody here is, again, blessed with the age of being able to remember this particular stuff. The web at one point got split between these two browsers. And devs effectively had to build two versions of their site in order to cope with this. And users had to declare loyalty to one particular browser and stick with it. It was a weird time of just frozen innovation. And in fact, everything froze, development froze, innovation stopped. And it was a really weird, crappy time for a number of years. But history restarted from an unexpected direction when the first iPhone appeared. And while it wasn't the first smartphone, certainly, it was certainly the first popular one. And it gave us this huge, enormous diversity lesson. Because we'd been assuming up until that point that our site had to work in, one of two browsers, effectively. And they couldn't cope with this new diversity of things. And so we had to learn things like responsive web design. Ethan Marcote's great synthesis of a few simple, dumb techniques again. Because we didn't want to exclude people. We didn't want to stop people from using our websites. And while I'm not an Apple lover by any means, despite the laptop, it was a gift to us. These were really good times because we were suddenly designing with all kinds of devices in mind. It was the ultimate of the web. But are we starting this cycle again? Maybe with different aspects, different technology reasons, but with the same result, which is that suddenly we're starting to exclude people from the web again. We've suddenly got websites that require megabytes to download, just like how we talked about earlier. This is incredible. Basic information sites with text content, not YouTube, not videos. Accessibility, who's that? It's still a complete unknown to most people. It's somehow not a core requirement of being a front-end developer. Somehow it doesn't appear on our job applications, when it should be one of the core skills. And, this is not going to be popular, JavaScript as a default delivery mechanism, just to deliver HTML. Now, I'm going to take a moment to just rant here a little bit, because here to me, this feels like building a Boeing 747 to commute to work. You know, build that plane up, take it up into the sky, land it 2 kilometers away, which is technically amazing, and I've got such awe and love for you for doing that. But wouldn't you have been better getting a bicycle, you know? We should have this layered approach to things. This HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And it's led to this weird situation now, where sites are no longer robust. Like we saw earlier, it used to be the case where all sites could just run, no matter if their innards were ripped out. But now, sites die easily. They're fragile and they shatter. Things like network conditions, user choices, blocked JavaScript can all destroy a site. And maybe as a response to this, we've got this whole new focus. We now talk about tooling and packaging and ecosystem stuff, which, don't get me wrong, I mean, I use this every day. I use Webpack, I use NPM, I write modular JavaScript. I get why we need this stuff. But the focus has become on developer happiness, on us having fun. And the word users, despite these talks that we've had today, which have been superb, the word users, in the general consensus in the industry, has disappeared. And we're back to building sites that are not for everybody. We're starting to explicitly say, my site is not for some users, because we want to have our fun. So maybe it's time to stop this kind of cycle, which is a common one in tech, let's face it. I mean, remember when we reinvented IRC, just so we could have Giphies in there? Or we reinvented RSS and called it accelerated mobile pages. We're afraid to build on top of things now. We just want to disrupt. It's about the prestige and the money and the bling. And it's not about the people anymore. But, you know, maybe that's just life under late stage capitalism. And we should just accept that. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's a bit negative. There are things that we can actually do before it's too late. So what can we do to break this cycle? How can we make the web better again? Well, firstly, we can learn the basics. And I don't mean of technology here. I mean about people. I mean about human things, such as empathy. And we've got this assumption that empathy is some kind of innate trait, that you're either born with it or you're not born with it. And that is such a lie. Empathy is a muscle. It's a learnable skill that you can reinforce every day just by practicing it. And practicing this empathy allows us to be more aware of other people's needs. Become aware that not everyone is like us here in this room right now. Because we're generally quite rich people in this industry. I know we don't always feel like it right now. I literally stopped paying off my student loans last year. I feel you on this. But in the assumptions that we make about things, for example, how many people here have got like the latest technology, have got the latest MacBook? How many people here have got the latest iPhone X on order for next month? Not everyone else is like this. The rest of the world doesn't think in these ways, and yet we do. And in fact, we kind of make these idiots into the norm for things when they're not. And we've got to be better than that. So what else can we consider? We can consider the fact that not everyone is well connected in the world. And I think sometimes we consider a poor connection to be something like this. There must be, some poor person in a hut somewhere, you know? Those poor people. Which is a bit of a weird racist thing, because the actual reality is this. I saw a statistic the other day. There was something like 30% of rural America is still on dial-up internet. 56 kilobits per second is the standard for huge numbers of people in the richest country on the planet. And again, we had Harry talking about this earlier, what the realities of the internet connection are for people around the planet. Another step in empathy, maybe we've got to consider that not everybody is able-bodied. In fact, 12% of all people have a disability of some form or another. And that's not just things like wheelchairs and blindness, the stereotypes that we think of. It actually covers huge areas. Stuff like color blindness, arthritis, the use of crutches. We've just got to keep these things in mind constantly, because our job at the end of the day is about building things for other people. It's fundamentally about empathy. That is the core of our job. Okay, so maybe you've listened to these things and maybe you take them on board. So how can you start using them in the real world? What does building with empathy mean? Well, it's this. Doorknobs. I know, CSSConf Budapest. Now, both of these doorknobs are absolutely lovely. I'm sure we can all agree on that. We don't discriminate against doorknobs here. But one of these works for everybody on the planet, while the other one excludes people. Excludes people who might have arthritis, who might be amputees, or who might be using crutches. And if we start thinking in this kind of mindset, just with that simple example, we start helping more people. Again, as we heard earlier, we start helping things other than just the obvious case. So designing a door handle in a proper way, actually helps people who are carrying large loads, who are carrying bags, who've got a baby in their arms. And you can take this empathy into the workplace and try to get it in there from the beginning by progressively designing. And that means starting right at the very start, sketching things with UX people, testing ideas with people before you ever touch code, before we jump in with the latest exciting technology that we've heard about. Just stop and think about how a person will use it. And then you can get those ideas into HTML. And I do mean just HTML. You know, the traditional thing with forms and H1s and no styling. Test if this kind of stuff works with real people again. Because this HTML is going to be the foundation of your website. And why should you do it like this? Well, if you build it this way from the start, you're checking the basics from the start. And because HTML is super generous and gives you so much accessibility stuff for free without you even having to think about it. If you do things this way, think about basic HTML first, you're going to have something that works from the start. And as a bonus, you're going to be seeing how a screen reader might see it, or how someone using a text mode browser might see it. And then, once you've got a working HTML foundation, then you can mold it up. Get some Ghost music soundtrack on, start molding it into a beautiful design, forming that HTML into components. And then, only then at that point, do you add the fancy things. Do you put the JavaScript on top? Upgrade those boring forms that we talked about so that they, I don't know, connect to REST APIs. So the pagination now works without a page reloading. But I know that was a bit abstract, so let's give you a practical example of this. Now this is going to be something that I've been working on for the last few weeks, you know, as part of a small side project that we've got at our workplace. And we start out in exactly that way. We talk about starting with HTML. And then we add the most simple style sheet to it. Something that's barely more than styled HTML. And we make sure that that works everywhere. And it does work everywhere, just by nature of what it is. This is fundamentally workable on every device. iPhone, desktop, whatever it is. And then we do a test against a fancy media query, one that is being crafted to catch the latest browsers. And then those browsers, we send an upgraded experience. We send them a full working style sheet. And in fact, this is a reduced form of the BBC's cutting the mustard technique. And yes, we've deliberately chosen to exclude some browsers from having a full enhanced experience here. Because we know, even if those older browsers get that reduced functionality, that reduced styling more, it will still work for them. And then, like I said before, only then do we load in fancy JavaScript. And we attach that by a match media event, because we check to see if the CSS is loaded. And if the CSS is loaded, we know it's advanced browser, we can attach JavaScript to it. And then we can do tabbing, we can do animations, we can do year dropdown. And we've got all this documented in an open playbook that we maintain. I'll post a link to this afterwards on Twitter, so you can all take a look at this in more detail. And that is the fundamentals of progressive enhancement. A really simple example, but it's about making a site universal from the start and only upgrading it when it becomes necessary. And doing something like that makes a site robust as hell. Again, you can make it so that it doesn't fall over when one aspect of it breaks. And in addition, it's the ultimate in agile development. Because by doing things this way, you don't sketch something in Sketch and then try to code towards that as a final goal. You don't have this waterfall approach to things that is, quite frankly, common in our industry right now. No, you do things agile. You build, you test, you iterate, you build, you test again over and over, making something gradually better as you go along. And for people like me who are fundamentally lazy, this is amazing. It means you only build what you need to. You don't start out trying the latest techniques. You only add advanced things as they are necessary. This incredibly lean approach to things. And it also fights FOMO. If people don't know what FOMO is, fear of missing out. And again, this is something that I think we all suffer from. I know I certainly do. I hear about the latest techniques and say, oh my God, I haven't learned about that one. We tend to get excited by the latest technologies. And rather than asking again, does it benefit the users? Does this make things better for them? It stops us and puts a brake on that excitement. Because we do, frankly, tend to build too complex at the moment. We're trying to keep up collectively with giant engineering companies that have tens of thousands of engineering staff doing the latest things. And we're all running behind trying to keep up with them and thinking this must be the best way of doing things. When it isn't necessarily. Maybe we could just start keeping things simple a bit more. And there are some limitations. I will be the first to admit that. It's absolutely amazing, but one thing progressive enhancement is still beat by easily by the client-side JavaScript frameworks that are out there right now, is state management. Absolutely, state management is a big thing. But I will still argue that it is only a minority of sites that actually work that way. The high-profile sites all rely on it. But the average site that we are producing does not need to jump into full state management immediately. And in fact, maybe we can work on that. I actually think this is something that will come in the future. We'll have that merging of easy state management and progressive enhancement. And that will be incredible for the web at that point. But we should remember what it excels in again. Doing things this way makes it robust and makes it universal. Makes it work for everybody. It will always work in the worst conditions. When there's broken JavaScript, when there's bad network conditions, when people deliberately disable things. And believe me, they do deliberately disable things now. JavaScript is being turned off by people I know simply because they want to avoid the adverts and the huge number of third-party downloads that come from those. It's lightweight and it loves people first. But anyway, even if you don't do progressive enhancement, there's still all those things that people have talked about earlier in the day. You can do stuff like turning on in your DevTools, turn on 3G performance. Turn on CPU throttling. Start using a site like average people do out there in the real world. Simulate those real world conditions. And if you can, use real hardware. Because again, as we've heard today, your €3,000 Mac is not anywhere near the performance of what a real world person has. It's vastly overpowered. The new iPhone that people are going to have next week is infinitely more powerful than the average phone that people hold in their hands. But because we use these every day, we assume that everybody else uses them, and they don't. And again, as was said earlier, if you can make this run on a low-powered device, if your site runs on the lowest end of things, it's going to be screamingly fast on the real high-powered devices. And then in addition, just another one of those little tasks you can do. You can turn on your screen reader. And again, if you're a stereotype of the developer, which we all are, you can just have to do, on your Mac, you just have to go Command F5, and you've immediately got VoiceOver turned on, and you can start testing these things. You can start navigating your site by sound. And believe me, this is so much fun when you actually do it for the first time, when you actually find out what a whole new interface to using websites. And there's a steep learning curve with it, don't get me wrong. You have to learn 100 new key combinations. But if we're a group of people who can learn APIs by heart and all the different CSS properties, I'm confident we can learn that kind of thing, for sure. And similarly, start trying to navigate with your keyboard every day. And this one is incredibly easy. It's one key, just tab through everything. Start seeing what your website looks like with that. Try and discover those little things that we saw earlier, those little ordering errors that can creep in so easily by going visual first. You'll be amazed at how much better you can make your sites straight away. Be my hero is said by the CEO somewhere, but these aren't my users. I don't have users like these. Poor users or disabled users. And I will come back to you and say, you do have users like that. You do, because you don't know a user's situation at any point. You can't always assume they are in the best situation. They might be, even your millionaire user, your hypothetical user, might have borrowed a phone off somebody else. They might be sitting at a scaled-down work computer. They could just be in a bad situation on holiday somewhere. You cannot know this. And at the end of the day, even those millionaires are going to have crappy days. So let's try and be kind to the poor old millionaires. Anyway, the web success is built on it being robust. Being built on a robustness that works for anybody. And now that people depend on that robustness, we have to keep defending it. We have to keep that beauty and that weirdness in the web. Because the web is beautiful because of its diversity. Its diversity of people and its diversity of technology. We are the enablers for that diversity. So let's not make it about us. And let's start making it about the wonderful weirdness of the web. Thank you.